Proverbs 30 and 31. These two chapters are not written by Solomon, but by two men, otherwise unknown men, one named Agur and the other Lemuel. They both seem to be foreigners, possibly from the area of Arabia. And this, therefore, would be an example of what foreign wisdom would have been like. And in fact, chapter 31 is very commonly compared to an Egyptian text that has much of the same discussion about a virtuous woman. So both of the chapters include the name Yahweh, and so my guess would be that these are converts to Yahwism that lived outside of Israel, and they were able to have their wisdom included in the book of Proverbs. The last chapter, of course, of Proverbs has that famous acrostic poem, 22 verses long, talking about the strong, courageous, virtuous woman. It's an acrostic poem, meaning that every letter of the Hebrew alphabet is given in order, and each line begins with that next letter. It's very instructive to me that this culture, this ancient culture, would give such prominence, and again, being the conclusion, is the most prominent place for an argument, and they put this issue of what is a good, virtuous woman, a strong woman, at the very end of the book. That is instructive for this culture. I said earlier that Proverbs was, in its general purpose, drawing us into the appreciation of the ambiguity of life, and how we're not just trying to live by a list of do's and don'ts, or competing lists of do's and don'ts, but how to venture, as it were, down this middle path. And I used the example of wine back in chapter 20 it was. We could argue don't drink wine. We could argue do drink wine. But the argument of the text seems to be, in general, or at least the larger purpose of the book of Proverbs, is to not come up with a list and live by that list, but to navigate that middle path, that really the most difficult path of all. Back in Ecclesiastes, which we just finished, we had this verse, in fact, 7:16, do not be overly righteous. And again, it doesn't matter what side of the path I put these words on, but do not be overly righteous or wise, and do not be overly wicked or foolish. Well, again, you could argue I'm supposed to be here, I'm not supposed to be here, but you can sense again from the larger context of the book of Ecclesiastes that the temptation of, in fact, this comes out of the writings of Maimonides, so let me bring him up now. He believed that it was a uniquely human temptation to want to run to the extremes of life. And by that I mean that he found, again, Maimonides was a Middle Age, or from the Middle Ages, he writing from Spain, he was a Jewish scholar. And he believed, as he studied psychology and such, that the human temptation, even those who are godly, believed, or again, there is this desire to want to go to extremes, thinking that that is where God is found. And his argument was that really the most biblical argument of how to live, or the most consistently biblical notion of living wisely, is to be found between the extremes. Listen to his little vignette called Strive for the Middle Way. The right way is the mean in every single one of a person's character traits. It is the character trait that is equally distant from the two extremes, not close to one or the other. Therefore, the wise of olden times commanded that a person continuously appraise, evaluate, and direct one's character traits in the middle way in order to achieve perfection. One should therefore be neither exceedingly stingy nor squander all one's wealth, but shall give charity according to his means and provide a fitting amount to the needy. One shall be neither buffoonish nor morose, but rejoice calmly with a cheerful demeanor all his days. And he goes on with other examples. So I think this is a good lesson to learn. In fact, from today's reading, chapter 30, Proverbs 30, verses 8 and 9. Give me neither, and again, it doesn't matter which side of the road I put this on, but give me neither riches nor poverty. Feed me with the food you prescribe for me. It's almost like he's trying to say, I know exactly where that is. It's somewhere between riches and poverty. So that, or lest I be full and deny you, or I be poor and I blaspheme your name. So again, I think in the wisdom books that we've been reading, and we're coming to the close of these 4 wisdom books, it's asking us, in a sense, without just coming out and saying it, but I think Maimonides was right, that the more difficult path to walk, and thus the most godly path, really, when we think about it, is in between the extremes.